Hello and welcome to Every Horror Movie on Netflix, this show where we watch, review, and discuss every horror movie on Netflix. I am Chris, back again with Patrick.
Hello.
And Steven.
Hey guys.
And today we are assembled to discuss the 2002 horror film The Ring. Sort of a big deal when that came out and since, but the Wheel of Death picked that one for us. But before we get into our discussion of The Ring, as usual, we are going to catch up on what else we've been watching or reading or consuming in the horror realm. So, Patrick, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Not a whole lot, and actually the one thing that I have done is something I don't want to talk about right now because I actually did watch RINGU, the Japanese film that The Ring is based on, so I'm sure I'll be referring to that and making a comparison or two through the discussion today, so I'm not even going to get into it right now.
You can be the hipster who's like, actually, this was done better in RINGU. Actually, that's clear if you watched RINGU.
I mean, actually, I guess the quick take is I actually preferred The Ring.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've actually heard that. I've heard that this seems to be the more popular opinion.
I mean, The Ring's budget is 30 times more, and Gore Verbinski mostly knows what to do with it. So, The Ring looks better than RINGU. Some interesting differences in the story and some interesting, very close similarities between the two, but I'll probably bring those up as we discuss The Ring today.
What about you, Steven?
Do I have anything? Yeah, I finally caught up with Evil Dead Rise. I loved the Evil Dead original trilogy when I was in high school. I still have a fondness for those movies, but I don't revere them or anything like that. I don't, they're important to me, but I'm only going to watch them once every 10 years. So my expectations for this film, which has very little to do with the originals, no returning characters or anything like that, were pretty through the floor. I went in, just looking for a good 90-minute gore fest. Watched it with a good crew of people, and I actually had a really good time with it. It's not a great movie, but I think it interestingly captured the gonzo spirit of the original Evil Dead movies, which got crazier as they went along, while also adding in some decent character stuff. Nothing too profound, but enough to keep me invested in the bodies that are being, ripped asunder throughout. And yeah, I had a great time. I'll probably never watch it again, but it was a hell of a lot better than it had any right to be. What have you been up to, Chris?
Well, we just had 4th of July, my favorite holiday. No, it's not. But I watched Uncle Sam, the Bill Lustig, Larry Cohen film from 1996 about a patriotic veteran who comes back to life after being killed in action on the 4th of July and goes on a killing spree, much to the chagrin of his 10-year-old nephew who adores him and thinks he's a war hero and wants to be a war hero himself. Wasn't a very good movie, but it was a pretty good satire for the first 45 minutes or so, because the way this kid idolizes his Uncle Sam, who we know is a sicko on his best day and a monster once he's dead. It's played so straight and it's so familiar. The way he talks about the military is the way we talk about the military in America and the way that we're all expected to feel about the military. So it's just kind of dryly funny that he's putting all this praise upon this guy who we know is just a monstrous sicko. Once Uncle Sam comes back from the dead, there's a couple inspired slasher-esque scenes, but I thought it went off the rails completely. Was very boring. The satire kind of lost its relevancy. And it was kind of hard to get through. Isaac Hayes has a supporting role and steals every scene he's in. He's a very good actor that I wish got more acclaim as an actor. But it was fun. It was fun enough to watch on the 4th of July. And even though it wasn't a great movie, I can see myself putting it on in 4th of Julys to come or Memorial Days to come, just to have something on that's a little bit weird. So that's, I guess, maybe a low cue it for Uncle Sam.
You know, I was trying to think. I've talked about Larry Cohen like the last 3 episodes. Totally forgot he wrote that, so I need to see it on that basis. I was struggling to think of a 4th of July horror movie, so I didn't end up watching one.
Yeah, there aren't that many.
So I'll have to
Jaws.
throw that on next year.
Jaws is the one to watch.
Yeah, I've been wanting to rewatch Jaws for so long, and I frankly forgot that it was 4th of July adjacent until one of our Amon faithful pointed out on the Discord, but didn't get to that this 4th of July. So we'll see if I finally rewatch Jaws before next 4th of July.
Well, we do Christmas in July, so can't we do like 4th of July in December? Mix it up a little bit?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? One more note on Uncle Sam. It was very similar to Maniac Cop and Maniac Cop 2, which is the
Larry Cohen movies.
Same personnel, but not nearly as good, in my opinion. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit subversive, you might want to check out Maniac Cop, which, in my opinion,
you do.
They could just, it's a little redundant. They could just call it Cop, am I right?
Not the first time you've made that joke in my presence, but I still love it.
Anyway, for this week's business at hand, we watched, like I said, The Ring by Gore Verbinski, starring Naomi Watts and a little moppet who went on to become an attorney and may someday be on the Supreme Court of the United States.
What's his name? David Dorfman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to see the confirmation hearings for David Dorfman, where they're isn't it true that when you were a child you were plagued by visions of things that didn't exist? Isn't it true you had violent fantasies?
Isn't it true you passed on a cursed tape to someone else to avoid your own death?
Yeah.
What does the name Samara mean to you?
Anyway. Now I assume we've all seen actually the ring is in our fucking logo, so I assume we've all seen it.
The wheel was like, come on, guys, let's get to it.
I have seen it, but it took me a long time. I mean, that came out when I was still in Bubble Childville, so I certainly didn't see it when everyone else did. I would estimate I saw it within like the last 5 to 7 years or something.
How did you feel about it then?
Oh, I enjoyed it very much and enjoyed it similarly this time. I was kind of surprised by it, actually, because like I think based on sort of the reputation it had at the time, it struck me as one of those, like, I know, almost like in the I Know What You Did Last Summer, like, I mean, and certainly The Grudge kind of camp, which, I mean, The Grudge kind of happened because of The Ring's success, but it kind of struck me as something that was likely to be pretty lame when I finally watched it. And I was like, oh, this is honestly much higher quality than I was anticipating when I saw it the first time.
I saw it, I don't think I saw it in the theater, but I definitely saw it on video, like, right after it came out, and it deeply unsettled me. I mean, that was a movie that I was, like, kind of afraid to revisit for a number of years afterward. So I know I've seen it in the interim between, you know, having to revisit it for this episode, but a lot of it still felt a little fresh to me.
I was aware of it. I remember it came out when I was in high school, and it was just another one of those horror movies that comes along once in a while and is like a phenomenon among whatever age demographic I was in. And I remember everyone was talking about The Ring and how scary it was. And I remember the first time I watched it was like we had a lazy day at school, like before a holiday break or something, and one of my classmates like brought in the video, brought in the DVD. I think they brought in that and Anger Management with Adam Sandler and Jack Nicholson. But I watched like the first like half or less of The Ring on like a TV in a classroom, and I was like, this is actually really cool and scary. What the fuck? But then I never actually watched the full thing until, I don't know, relatively recently. I would say maybe 2012, 2014, something like that. And that was the first time I actually had watched it. But like I had, you know, kind of absorbed it through the culture in the meantime. So I kind of knew what to expect. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. And then this is my first time in years watching it actually, from start to finish.
When you saw it in school, was the TV on one of those big stands that only exist for high school classrooms?
No, it was actually on a permanent shelf, but it was we had CRT in school. This was a CRT TV.
I think that's the way to see this, honestly.
I know. Every time someone says outlaw CRT in school, I say, how are we going to watch movies?
I just thought to contextualize this for myself, because I was pretty sure this came out the same year as another movie that I was bubble childed away from seeing, and it did in fact come out the same year as Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie, which I was not allowed to watch because it was too violent.
Oh no, it is pretty violent though. Let's be honest.
I mean, it does have a couple of rather gory moments. Yes,
it's pretty violent.
So
I stand with your parents.
Oh my god, no, you should have been allowed to see Spider-Man. But did your parents watch, did they like screen movies for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and specifically they I remember them getting like the VHS of Spider-Man, because I mean, I was like, when that movie came out, that was, I think, kind of what got me into comic books. And I mean, again, it's bizarre because I hadn't even seen the fucking movie, but I was just fascinated by I think just behind the scenes stuff. And then, I was just interested in reading about the making of the movie and stuff. And so, of course, I wanted to see the movie. But yeah, they screened the VHS. I believe my mom talking about scrubbing through parts of it to basically, she was just checking for the nasty shit. And I remember her describing the scene in which the goblin gets impaled by his own glider, which, I mean, frankly, describing it, it's kind of one of those things where whatever violent imagery you come up with in your head is absolutely worse than what's actually in the movie, And
yeah.
I don't know. You must censorship, man, whether it's parents or not.
You must have been, maybe that's why the movie Censor resonated so strongly with you, or one of the reasons.
Maybe.
But it's so funny because you would have been, we're the same age, so you would have been right on the cusp of 13 when that movie came out, which would have made it appropriate for you to watch a PG-13 movie, one would think.
Yeah.
They were trying to shelter you from the kiss in the rain.
Oh, pretty steamy.
Yeah, they didn't want to open that Pandora's box. But yeah, so The Ring, if you've been, I'm trying to think of the listener who doesn't know what The Ring is, but I think we take for granted, I feel like there's probably a generational gap. I don't know if Zoomers know The Ring like we know The Ring. It's possible we got some people out there who don't know anything about The Ring. Basically, the story.
They know what The Ring is. They've seen Incantation.
Is there a ring in Incantation?
No, but it's similar.
I was just kind of shocked remembering, because I kind of forgot about some of the parallels, and especially kind of the final twist is very Incantation, except Incantation kind of rips it off and then also takes it to the next level in a certain way. But we'll get into that in the spoiler room.
Well, it's an American remake of a Japanese film that, I mean, that was information that came out after The Ring was a huge hit. I think people were like, oh, by the way, all the hipsters in high school were like, it's actually a Japanese film. But
that was me, but I didn't see the Japanese film, so I was just full of shit.
Yeah, but it's about a woman played by Naomi Watts. What's her name?
Doesn't matter.
Rachel. Her name
Naomi
is
Watts.
Rachel.
Her name is Naomi Watts.
Rachel. I remembered that.
Good white girl name.
Her name, a very big name. If it's the year 2002, everyone's named Rachel or wants to be named Rachel in 2002.
Wants to be named Rachel.
Anyway, she is a newspaper reporter by trade, which I thought was cute. It gives this whole thing a little bit of a All the President's Men feel, to see the whole newsroom, and she's working the phone in it. But
I mean, truly though, I mean, how many, I can't even really think of many other horror movies where there's a protagonist who's a journalist and is kind of conducting their investigation of the goings on from a journalist perspective. That's kind of cool. I mean, partly because I'm a fucking journalist, so it's just narcissism, but also there's some fun novelty factor to that.
It's a little thin. That's not really a big part of the movie. But she also has personal reasons for exploring this story later. Basically, the story is we open with two girls, and one of them is relating an urban legend, basically, about the videotape that kills you. You die after you watch it. It's a creepy video. You watch it, you get a phone call that says you're going to die in 7 days, and 7 days later, you fucking die.
It reads like Chris wrote it in G-Chat. It sounds like something you would make up in G-Chat.
Well, I would make it up because I would be riffing on The Ring.
True, but also like this is your kind of thing, like two like high school girls talking about an urban legend, and then something actually awful happens to them.
Yes, exactly. So the one girl's telling the story. The other girl is alarmed because she's like, actually, this is happening to me. And for reasons I don't understand, they kind of walk the line where we're not sure if this girl's fucking with the other girl or not. Like, she doesn't seem to be taking it all as seriously as she would if it were actually happening to her.
But yeah, she says she's joking, and then 2 minutes later, she says she's actually not.
I don't know.
It's another 2 minutes after that, she's dead.
It's silly, but she dies. She gets killed. So then we find out that girl was actually that family, that girl and her mother. I don't think there's a blood relationship, or is there? To Naomi Watts.
That girl. Oh, yeah, it's her niece.
Okay, is it?
That's
okay.
what I thought. Yeah.
All right, so it's Naomi Watts' sister is the mom of this dead girl. Not only that, but the dead girl was like number one babysitter, number one family friend, BFF forever to Naomi Watts's little boy, who's like 8 or 9 or something like that. I don't know how. Is he 8 or 9 or is he younger? He's probably like 6.
But he acts like he's 40. So
he acts like he's
irrelevant.
40, but I
typical horror movie kid.
I think he's 6 or 7. Wise beyond his years, though. Anyway, they were super close. So the little boy is super rattled.
He's already ready to take the bar.
The kid's super rattled by this death. Naomi Watts is rattled by this death. They go to the wake. It's a disaster. And Naomi Watts's, I guess, sister is like, this doesn't make any sense to me. What the hell's going on? And so Naomi Watts is kind of like, well, look, I know a thing or two about investigation. I'm going to figure out what's going on. Begins to uncover a series of deaths. This dead girl, turns out all her friends died too at the same time. Really, a week after they went on a little camping debauchery trip in a cabin out in the country. And Naomi Watts is going to figure out what the hell is going on. What the urban legend about this videotape is all about, and what happened to her niece and all her dead friends. And that's sort of the setup. But yeah, spoiler alert, there is a videotape that kills you when you watch it 7 days later. And it's not a spoiler to tell you, Naomi Watts is going to watch that tape. Her ex-boyfriend is going to also watch the tape. And her son is going to watch the tape. So we're really on a race against time to solve this mystery before that ghost comes knocking.
So to go back to the prologue is such a compelling way to introduce this whole thing. I love the way it just throws you in immediately, explains the urban legend, does away with a character that you think might be significant, but it certainly is not. Also, directly lifted from Ringu. Ringu starts the exact same way. So I was giving this movie some credit for that opening, and it doesn't deserve it.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I mean, true. Yeah, if you're remaking the shit, keep the stuff that works, which it does. Most of the big moments in this are kind of lifted from Ringu, except for one that is one of the weirdest moments and most memorable moments. Actually, has nothing to do with Ringu at all. But I like this opening regardless. It works in both.
I want it because I know you're going to be comparing the two throughout, which I'm really excited to hear what the differences are and the similarities. But I always knew it as Ringu. Like when we hipsters found out after this movie came out was a hit that it's based on a Japanese movie, it was called Ringu, but it's on Shudder as just Ring. And I'm wondering what that's about.
Ringu is just how you would actually pronounce it in Japanese. Like if you read the characters, it's Ringu, but the English translation would be Ring.
Okay. Oh, that's what I thought. I just thought it was kind of odd that it's such a famous movie. Like, why would you translate it back to just Ring? I don't know. Sales, maybe.
Yeah. Tubi has it as Ring too, I think, which is where I watched it.
And the ring, the titular ring, for those who somehow don't know, is the signature image that you see on this cursed videotape. Mm-hmm. There are many eerie images on the videotape, but the ring is sort of the oh, now you're watching a cursed videotape
And it's the big kind of visual metaphor of the movie. That motif appears all throughout and is kind of meaningful to the plot in some ways.
Yes.
Kind of looks like an eclipse. It's like a halo of light emanating from around a dark object.
Mm-hmm.
Should we talk about the tape? Should we talk about the tape these people are watching? Like, it is... Now there's this trend of, cursed images, that are typically manufactured by people online, now mostly using AI, I assume, to just, create images that are slightly off, that have an uncanny quality to them. And this videotape is just a series of those types of images, all in black and white. It almost feels like a psychological test made to make you feel as unwell or uncomfortable as possible. And it is quite striking, while also a character even jokes about it. I think it's the ex-boyfriend that has a very student film quality to it. It kind of rides that line. But I found it to be still truly unsettling on this view.
Oh yeah.
How do you guys feel about the tape itself?
The tape's my favorite thing about the movie. Kind of. It's very creepy, but what I like about it is how mundane almost all of the images are. In fact, the only parts of the tape that I don't like are the ones where you see the throat with the rope coming out of it, or the fingernail getting pierced, and the things that are actually objectively uncomfortable, unpleasant images, because the rest of it is just a tree, a mirror, a ladder, a chair. And it's but it all just feels very wrong, even though you're not seeing anything scary. And I think that's really fun. And then it sort of becomes a scavenger hunt in the movie, because our hero keeps seeing these mundane objects as she goes throughout the investigation. And they rhyme with what was on the tape, and it's unsettling. I really like it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it invites so many interesting questions as to how these things are connected, if at all, which, I mean, eventually they all wind up being connected. But it's here's a fucking CGI giant millipede. Here's a woman, looking at you out of a mirror. Here's bloody water, How does this all connect? And it does come together in interesting ways.
Kind of to my chagrin. I thought they tied everything up too neatly. It makes sense for the plot of the movie, but I like it being more sort of intangible than what it ends up being.
Same.
Here's the question for me is it creepy because there's so much buildup about this cursed tape that we're, actually kind of like the violence in Spider-Man, are our brains already working overtime anticipating something scary, and so we make these things seem scarier as we watch it? Or would this just be scary on its own in a vacuum?
No, it's inherently scary, and the soundtrack, that whining sort of thing, that
is unsettling.
It's all unsettling. If you had never seen The Ring and your TV came on in the middle of the night and played this, you would burn your house down.
Fuck no. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You don't need someone to tell you, you die in 7 days after you watch this, to be deeply unsettled by these images.
Yeah. I think it's inherently scary, and I think, this is not an airtight theory, but I've been mulling over this movie today, and there were some shots that really stuck out to me when I revisited it last night, where I think the movie does have this meta quality to it as well, about the act of watching, and about the anticipation of something scary happening, and why we're drawn to that, or why we try and censor that to viewers, especially because a kid features so largely in this movie too, right? And the mom's trying to protect him from this tape. It's not unlike your parents, Patrick, protecting you from Spider-Man, in a way. And I think the movie, I don't know that it has a whole lot to say about that, but I think there's some visuals in it. There's a scene where Naomi Watts is just watching people watching TV in their apartments across the way from her, as she's trying to get some respite from a stressful moment. And I remember there's a mom smoking a cigarette, looking back at her, and her daughter has her face almost comically close to the screen watching this cartoon on a giant CRT that has all there's something violent happening. I can't tell what it is. And there's also
a very, very clear Rear Window homage in one of those windows.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you guys noticed that. Yeah. Dude in a wheelchair with his legs in casts.
Oh, really? Yeah. I actually didn't clock that. I just thought I saw the whole thing as a Rear Window homage. I didn't clock that detail.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. And he's okay, if you didn't figure this out already, here's your clue.
Well, and this movie does that is maybe one of the biggest flaws of this movie for me this time around, is like it does not trust the audience's intelligence.
Yeah.
And like there's so much exposition and repetition of lines of dialogue or ideas throughout it. It got to be kind of distracting. I didn't realize that was happening on a visual level too.
Yeah, well, I didn't mind the repetition of dialogue, but I did hate how every time these images from the tape are repeated in life, they have to flash back to the video.
Yeah.
And that really that seemed like a studio note or something. Like, we don't think the 13-year-olds are going to get the connection. You need to make it scarier, because we see the tape so much that these images are all more or less burned into our heads, I think.
Yeah.
And then, so when we see the ladder leaning against the alley, we don't need a flashback to the tape that we watched 5 minutes ago in the shot of the ladder. And they do that like almost every time they show something creepy from the tape in real life. And it just kind of, I don't know, you feel like you're getting hit over the head with it, and it kind of reduces the sort of intangible mystery of it all.
See, I actually didn't mind that, because there are so many like near subliminal images in the tape. Like you just mentioned the pierced fingernail and the pulling the rope out of the throat. I don't remember those being in the tape at all. And I was like, my eyes were on the screen throughout that first viewing of the tape. And I'm pretty sure that when those two moments that you mentioned happen, like the pulling the rope out of the throat, I don't think it flashes back to the tape. And so that came a little more out of left field for me. I don't know. I don't mind that so much.
Yeah, I didn't mind the flashing back to the tape, because I do think I thought the repetition of images worked well for me. I thought this is a very well edited movie, speaking of which, except for when it feels, and I had the same exact thought you did, Chris, though, about a couple of different scenes. It felt like the studio saw a cut of this movie and was like, nope, nobody's gonna get it. 13-year-olds are gonna be watching this movie. You gotta spell it all out. And there's lots of like dialogue flashbacks while there's action happening, especially toward the end of the movie. Even one to, I mean, we'll talk about it in the spoiler room, but there's one that like kind of spells out one of the big sort of themes, or at least like motifs of the movie, by calling back to a line of dialogue that like happened maybe 20 minutes beforehand. If you'd forgotten it by then I don't know what you're doing watching a sophisticated-ish horror movie like this. It was spelled out very clearly the first time, and I think that's a very short amount of time to forget something important like that.
It's a pretty subtle movie until it's not, but the subtlety is really kind of hurt by this stuff. And this stuff, it would work. It would still work. It would just work subconsciously. Even if you didn't notice it, your brain would notice it, and you'd be spooked. We don't need to cut to the tape. Anyway, that's kind of a nitpick, because I agree that on the whole, it's a very well edited movie. It looks good. I was a little mad at the editor, but because of these insert shots. But then I was like, this is probably tortious interference by people. And also then I watched on my Blu-ray, because I watched this on Blu-ray, there's a reel of deleted scenes, and all the deleted content. I was like, I am so glad that got cut from the movie. It added nothing. The editor was on point. And it's funny because, all right, obviously this movie involves a VHS tape, and so there's a lot of what would be dating, I guess, of this movie. Like it's clearly set in a time other than our own. We have constant reminders, technological reminders of bygone era, but somehow it doesn't feel that egregious to me. When I watched the deleted scenes, there were 2 scenes that took place in a video store.
Ooh.
And it just was so outdated. One even has Naomi Watts checking out tapes, and she's checking out Pokemon, and the clerk is making he's making jokes about the Pokemon movie, and like just stuff that really would put it in, not make it timeless. And I feel like this still feels like a timeless movie, even though it has these, sort of outdated technologies in it. And I would not feel that way. This would feel like as it would feel as stuck in the early 2000s as, I don't know, what's a movie that's stuck in the early 2000s in horror?
I hear you though. It does feel. It felt. I was worried about that kind of interference too, taking me out of the experience, and I felt like it held up pretty well. I mean, there were a couple of things that were like, well, I mean, how could you avoid it? But it stands out like a sore thumb. Like the ex-boyfriend's like little mini HD camera that he uses to like take video of her to show her how her face looks up after she sees the tape. And it's like, well, that's a thing that will never exist again. It will never be cool to own a vintage one. It's just so ugly, but that was the state of the art at the time. You can't avoid it. But I thought for the most part, I mean, I know people who collect VHS tapes now. It's like for whatever reason, it's coming back around. So it almost feels contemporary in a way, looking back on it.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking about, I mean, I really enjoyed the era that this was set in. It's crazy to think about this being 20 years old, 21 years old at this point. And I don't know, you like sort of couldn't make this movie now because there's that weird spooky mystique to VHS tapes and the weird fucking tracking shit that would happen and getting it on the whatever play VCR she gets it on so that she can see the whole frame of the VHS and find the lighthouse that ends up giving her a clue as to where to go. I don't know. I was thinking about how even the recent sequel or reboot or whatever they did, how it even works. Like Rings, I don't know that this works as well if it's about fucking YouTube and digital video and whatever. A lot of the mystique of this is the VHS thing, or even going to the fucking library and looking through books. That's just, it's fun. It's fun. I don't know. Again, I don't think you could make this movie today necessarily and still have it be as enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. I did love, oh my God, I almost wanted to like cheer when she brought out the book of, America's Lighthouses, I think it was called. I was like, that's fucking rad. Like this lady, she is a good reporter. She's doing her research and she's going for a trusted text.
And like the first book she opens has the lighthouse in question in it, of course. So lucky choice there.
Well, I think people are trying to figure out how to make the internet scary, right? We've got, we've got Host, which I didn't care for, but people loved it. Even Skinamarink is like, I feel like trying to approach the sort of cursed image quality of at least the tape from The Ring and try and at least explore how you can mess with these images digitally in the way that you would have to physically, with like a VHS tape back in the day of like the, printing out. There's a lot of printing in this movie too, which I enjoyed, printing out frames of it. But I don't think anybody's managed, at least in the films I've seen, I don't think anybody's managed to do what The Ring does in the time that we're living in right now.
I don't think that the digital domain is as scary, and I mean, we'll talk about it in the spoiler room. I think there's some practical reasons why this has to be a tangible object that work for this movie. But yeah, I actually saw a tweet that talked about. It was some filmmaker of record talking about how like phones and the internet, it might have been Soderbergh. This sounds like a Soderbergh thing he would say anyway, but it was about how like phones and the internet have really fucked up movie making, and that like when everyone has a phone and everyone can text and call whoever they want at any moment and get the answer to any question with a couple seconds on Google, it just really takes away a lot of dramatic possibilities. Then I saw someone responding to that tweet on Twitter, with a list of filmmakers and how many years it's been since they made a movie that was set in present day. And the list is astonishing. Steven Spielberg hasn't made a movie set in the present day in 18 years. Tarantino, 16 years. Scorsese, 17 years. Paul Thomas Anderson, 20 years. Ridley Scott, 10 years. James Cameron, 29 years. They're taking some liberties with that because Avatar is futuristic, but
right. Same with Ridley Scott. Yeah.
The Coen brothers, 15 years. Like Tim Burton, 11 years. Like these people have no interest in making movies that's set in the real world amidst all this technology.
So I disagree with this premise. I think the internet is plenty scary. I just think a lot of the problem is that people are still trying to make movies that are scary in the way movies about the VHS era or the pre-cell phone era used to be scary. Like, I think there's a sort of a lack of invention because obviously we're still scared of shit. There's still lots to be scared of. It's just, it's not necessarily being exploited. And so instead we're doing shit like, you know, how many fucking movies now have the digital video where, you know, the tech nerd who has the unique power of video enhancement shows up and you enhance the frame and all of a sudden you see, you know, Mr. Boogie or whatever it is in Sinister. Although actually that's different in Sinister because I think that is still an 8mm tape or something like that. You know what I'm talking about, though. That's such a trope, like enhancing the video and all of a sudden you see something scary. Mm-hmm. It's just, I think, there's a lack of, there's just a refusal to kind of move into the current era and embrace what's scary about now.
I think it's just because it's not interesting to watch. Like, there are some great movies about watching, about listening, like, you know, like even like The Conversation, you know, the Coppola movie, whatever. Like, there are always going to be films that are set in the present time that use like current technology to tell interesting stories. But like one, I think you need a really solid reason to do it that's very compelling and timely and possibly even like political on some level, for at least for me to get on board with it. But also, it's really hard to make that interesting to look at on a screen because you would just be looking at people looking at screens the whole time.
And we've watched,
well, so, like, and I guess I'm not even necessarily talking about this idea of like looking at video necessarily so much as embracing other things that are scary. You know, I mean, because Chris started by talking about like now that everybody has a cell phone, you know, because that's such a common trope now. We have to come up with a way for the protagonist of a horror movie to not have cell service. But it's like you can still be in a scary situation with a cell phone and still be freaked the fuck out. You know, I think you just have to like work with the limitations more. And I rarely see people kind of have the, it doesn't even seem like creativity to me because I'm scared of shit all the time. And I have my cell phone by me. I have cell service. You know, it's like,
well,
I just think modern fears need to be exploited a little more.
This is why I think like the cabin in the woods or the camping trip horror movie like should be having a resurgence right now. I mean, we just went camping a weekend ago.
We can't talk about what happened.
We can't talk about what happened, but what we can say is if we needed to contact the authorities or text someone, we would have been fucked.
We'd be fucked.
Yeah. And we were only 45 minutes away from home.
Mm-hmm. And look, we've seen movies on this show that lean wholeheartedly into that. You know, Cam is a good example. You know, Unfriended and stuff like that. There are a lot of movies that are about the horrors that come with this technology and how the internet sometimes the scariest place to be, etc. But those just aren't.
Or Incantation. You know, Incantation's another good one.
But just they're not stories that everybody wants to tell, and. You know, I don't know. And there's never been a series or a movie that has figured out how to do text messaging. Either.
No, it never looks natural.
That's a huge thing. There's so much of the digital experience that just doesn't translate to cinema, even if it's still scary. Like just someone chatting with somebody or texting with somebody is so non-compelling versus what you have in a movie like The Ring, where they actually have to call people and the phone's ringing and then they're like, "Pick up, god damn it!"
Well, and I think you hit on it with like what you just said, that they're not stories people want to tell, and I think that's as telling as anything else that we have there's such a fetishism of like 80s technology, and again, going back to Skinamarink, we have an entire movie that's designed to look like it was shot on old ass VHS. And that's the whole point. Like that in and of itself is supposed to be scary. And it is on very occasional basis. I think we all kind of agreed on that. But there's just such an obsession with it. Just an obsession with the past. I don't know. I just want people to fucking live in the present. I'll get off my soapbox now.
I think it's natural to look to the past for inspiration and also to use the past as a reflection on what's happening now. But I agree with you. There is a lot of nostalgia porn out there that I'm just fucking tired of. Mm-hmm. Skinamarink being number one probably on my list.
Yeah. And there's some of it that's done well and that I enjoy. But overall, I guess I wish people would kind of lean a little more into the current moment with their storytelling. And again, there's still plenty of shit that's scary. So tell those stories, I guess.
I do think it's cute, though, and cozy that The Ring here, which, I mean, it's not... I feel like it's one of the later horror movies in the pre-digital era. sort of. Like, you know, I would say like 2007, 2008 is when we start getting like digital cameras in everybody's hand. We start getting our paranormal activities and our recs and our found footage stuff. And then obviously the internet explodes a lot from 2002 to 2008. There's a lot.
Yeah, The Ring is kind of like the end of an era, like, or the beginning of the end of an era.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that when she's like using a search engine, which we've seen a million times, and it's like one of the dullest things. We've talked about that before, like watching somebody type shit into Google. But I feel like there was probably a certain mystique to that at this point in time.
Yeah, and it actually makes for a halfway compelling scene because it's not just like, oh, here's the answer to the mystery. It's like, well, here's one historical society that uploaded some shit. But it's cool how this, and even the way we make movies, you know, 2002, I'll always remember is when Star Wars Episode 2 came out, which was like, I remember it as being like, oh, there's digital cinema now, and you should see this movie at a digitally projected screen because it's better. It's better. It was shot digitally, so you have to see it in a digital theater, which looking back is absurd. But that was
it looks like ass no matter which way you see it. But.
That was how they marketed it, and it's like, okay, now we're going to be making movies digitally, and obviously now we almost exclusively make movies digitally. But so The Ring kind of stands at that precipice. I mean, maybe if it were a couple years later, I could make this argument a little bit better, but I think it's cute how such a major horror movie right at that precipice has such a commitment to showing people using legacy media and analog technologies, whether it's the videotape or her in the newspaper room going through the books of newspaper copies, the answering machines, just all kinds of little stuff in this movie. It's a nice touch. It's a nice goodbye to an era.
It's a turning point. Yeah. I mean, it was necessity a lot of the time. I mean, I remember using microfiche at the library at that time. Chris, though, I feel like since you just mentioned Star Wars Episode 2, just for the fans' like enjoyment, I feel like you need to make your quick soapbox pitch of why Episode 2 is not only the best film of the prequel trilogy, but a good film in general.
A good film in general. I don't know if I can defend that, but it is by far the best of the prequel trilogy. In short, it's the only the episode 1 and episode 3 tell you too much information. The mystique of Darth Vader is lost if you see episode 3 and see how it happened, or if you see episode 1 and you see him as the little moppet. The structure is good. It has it really expands the Star Wars universe by showing you like the street level civilian life of Coruscant. It adds the mystery element, which is very effective with Obi-Wan going to Kamino. And it's just a good adventure story. And if you divorce it from the other prequels, it's the only one you need.
I think I asked for that as much as anything so that when I make the social media posts, I can say, and we discuss, you know, I try and pick out like the 3 weirdest fucking things we discussed in the episode, just so I can throw Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones in there.
That's good clickbait, yeah. And we talk about why Episode 2 is the best in the series, and we'll have 5,000 neckbeards logging on to say, actually, Star Wars Rogue One. But no, because here's the thing. If you see episode 2 without the others, it tells you everything you need to know. Episode 1 and episode 3 are redundant. You see episode 2 and you understand Anakin Skywalker and you see how he became Darth Vader without actually seeing him go in the lava and wear the suit. It's all you need.
All right, so back to The Ring.
Thank you. God bless you. Yeah, can we talk about humans for a minute? We've been talking about technology so much. I want to give Naomi Watts her flowers here because I want to give her flowers because
she's the most beautiful woman in the world.
I think that she's one of the most important reasons this movie works as well as it did, and I think it's a huge stroke of luck, frankly, that they wound up casting her for this. Because I mean, at this point in time, I mean, you could just as easily have had fucking Sarah Michelle Gellar or whoever, which, I mean, no disrespect necessarily to Sarah Michelle Gellar, but she's not an actor on the level of Naomi Watts. And Naomi Watts comes across as like a serious character, not just fucking, I mean, she does wear underwear in one scene, but not just like eye candy for a fucking teen horror film. She seems like a serious person with a career and some genuine motivation and genuine interest in this. And also not necessarily a pleasant person. Like, I like that there's some shading to this character where it's like, she's kind of a bit of an asshole, you know?
Yeah, and not a really good mother.
No,
not a great mother. No, compelling, complicated character. That's, I mean, decently written in the script and well performed by Naomi Watts.
So I actually watched a little bit of a Blu-ray featurette about that spoke to this, and I would say it's not luck. Gore Verbinski is just a visionary, and he said, you know what? I think horror movies like this only work if you don't cast like the name actor. You need someone that the audience can lose themselves to, and not
I agree.
Like,
Okay.
That's Sarah Michelle Gellar. And so they were looking for someone who wasn't a household name who could still anchor the more emotional bits of the movie. And damn,
Was she not
a part?
Was she not a household name at this time?
She's
No.
still
Is
not.
Is this like really?
I don't.
What?
Yeah, I would agree with Chris. So I was actually just revisiting Roger Ebert's.
I think of
review
Naomi
this
Watts
movie.
as like A-list almost.
Oh no, please.
She should be, but the movie she made before this was Mulholland Drive.
Yes. My favorite horror film, perhaps, or at least in my top 5.
Look up Ebert's review because he really dunked on this movie and seemed perplexed by her casting and performance in this. But I thought she served the material well. I think there were a couple of compelling moments, and yeah, I mean a lot of it is down to the character. If I didn't appreciate her performance, her character is kind of an asshole and kind of well, she does make some kind of bizarre decisions later in the movie too. But again, that's not the actress; that's the character and the writer.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone
I'm
I would.
spinning out.
I can't think of anyone I would cast in this role who would do a better job of this movie.
That's so interesting, like retrospectively, that I think of that as like a casting coup for this movie. But I guess she probably was not a huge name, and maybe it was even semi-cheap at the time.
Yeah, this is how I learned who Naomi Watts was, and I kind of followed her afterward because she, at the time, found her performance so compelling. Yeah, of course, I hadn't seen Mulholland Drive. That came years later for me.
I mean, this is still like, is this her biggest movie that she's been in?
Probably.
I mean, like I said, like household name, she's still not a very big star. I mean, she's known to us. She's known to us film people. But yeah, like King Kong, I guess.
King
was maybe
Kong.
the biggest movie she was in.
She's British.
Yeah.
What? You didn't know that?
No.
Oh well.
Huh. Interesting. Well, anyways, you referenced Chris Gore Verbinski being a visionary, and I feel like we should definitely touch on him as well. What were everyone's thoughts on Gore Verbinski's direction and his touch on this movie, or even just Gore Verbinski in general? Because I mean, what a fucking weird filmography! Like to go from this to Pirates of the Caribbean to Oscar winner Rango, and that's pretty much it. He hasn't done a ton actually, but just massive movies.
He actually did another horror movie fairly recently that I want to see
2016.
now. Yeah, what was it called?
A Cure for Wellness.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Not particularly well reviewed, but it has been recommended to me by a couple of people whose taste I trust. So
I'm real curious to see that. But I thought his direction of this movie was almost impeccable, with a big asterisk. I am not an anti-CGI person, but most of my complaints with this movie involve CGI. And it's kind of ironic because Gore Verbinski is someone that I've seen just acclaimed for how he approached CGI on the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I know that, Davy Jones was like a big deal when he came out, and he still holds up. Much like some other directors I could mention, he just has a very good command over CGI tools and how to use them. And so it was kind of surprising to me to see kind of the CGI that didn't work in this movie. But again, I kind of felt the hand of the studio. Like when you've just watched a scary ass video and you're staring at your own face in the dark TV in a dark room, that's scary enough. We don't need the little CGI blurry ghost to run through the background,
Yeah. I thought he, the thing that struck me the most about this movie, basically, I'll just repeat what I said earlier. It felt, we didn't use this term back then, but it felt cursed to me. And that's all down to the direction, sound design. Hans Zimmer's score is amazing too. But this movie has a look, and I appreciate any horror film, especially a big budget movie, that actually has a distinctive look and a tone that is not broken for the entire film. And he does that amazing. This movie looks cold and wet and just kind of, I don't know, and just very tactile in a way that I don't often see in big budget horror movies anymore. It felt like there was intention behind every shot, every move of the camera. Really impressive stuff.
Yeah, it feels very heavily color graded, and I might be like talking out of my ass here because I don't know technically too much what I'm talking about, but it has that like everything's very bluish gray, but also in a really striking way, in a way that feels unique and gives it a really unique kind of feel to it, as opposed to like the not just Zack Snyder, but the entire like school of Zack Snyder that's just like fucking invaded everything lately, where everything just has that gross like blue gray look to it. This still feels colorful while feeling drab and sad and rainy.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate a lot.
Yeah, it's not desaturated at all, like the Zack Snyder.
Yes. Yeah. That's it. The kind of my complaint, and I said this to Steven when we were texting last night, is it does feel music video-ish to me, and I'm not sure what I actually mean by that, other than just even the tape, which I like a lot, like the cursed tape. I'm like, this looks like a series of weird scenes that you might see in like an REM music video or something. And like Verbinski did direct music videos before he got into movies. I haven't seen any of them. I'm kind of curious to track down a few later tonight. But it has that weird visual sense to it. And I don't know, I guess this is a kind of a caveat, because generally I like the look of this and I appreciate what Verbinski did with it, but there is still something that feels music video-y to me. Like there should be a bunch of like kind of dark pop songs in this, which there's not.
And is that a problem? Like what's what's wrong with that? Because a lot of the great it does bother me sometimes when I think of like a lot of the great directors of like the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, you know, like David Fincher or Spike Jonze, you know, these are all people who came from music videos. But I think is like for all of them, when they have a good story, a good script, and good actors, and I mean, I don't think the script for this was all that great, I have to say, but I still wasn't bothered by the direction. You know, it can work and not be obnoxious. And I never found this to be obnoxious in the way that you're suggesting it could be.
No, I didn't find it obnoxious. It was just, I don't know, it's hard for me to even put my finger on what it was that, because I don't even want to say I disliked that about it. It was maybe a little distracting to me, is all I can say. I'm not sure. It's a little intangible for me.
Interesting. Should we review this movie, guys?
I think
Probably.
so. I think it's time. I mean, I think we've given you the premise. Our hero is on the trail of this video. Her research leads her to a rural part of the state where those kids went and stayed in the cabin a week or so ago. And what is she going to find there? And what's going on with this videotape? We will tell you. But first, we're going to review it. Steven, you're the one who led us to this point in reviewing it. Would you view it, cue it, or screw it?
I mean, I have a feeling if you're listening to this podcast, you've seen this movie. You know, you've probably seen it many more times than all three of us combined. Like, it's a huge deal, this movie. It was a huge deal at the time. People still revisit it, still talk about it. But if you haven't seen it, definitely see it. Like, I have complaints about it. There are things I thought were absolutely absurd in this movie and ridiculous, mostly down to dialogue that I just, like, it hit me differently when I was a kid. And, you know, I felt like I was entering the world of adults while I was watching this R-rated movie. It is rated R, right? It's got to be.
No, it's PG-13.
It's PG-13.
It's PG-13.
Wow.
Yeah.
So all these people, and I see them online, who are like, "Oh, this horror movie's it's PG-13. I'm not watching."
I hate that shit.
Grow up.
Oh my god.
Grow up.
Yeah.
Grow the fuck up.
I mean, I don't want to see a Saw movie that's PG-13, but like for most horror movies, you can be scary as hell at PG-13 level.
Yeah. Anyway, like minor quibbles. Well, I won't say minor. Some of them actually were like so distracting to me that I almost gave this a cue it. But yeah, definitely see it if you haven't. What the fuck are you doing? It's The Ring. Like, you call yourself a horror fan? It's got a great atmosphere. Even when I was distracted by some of the clunky dialogue and shit and the exposition, I was still felt like there was a sustained mood through this whole thing that even like weird attempts at humor couldn't break. And that's impressive to me. That's very rare to see. The Ring. View it. Chris.
I'm envisioning Alec Baldwin and Glenn Ross going up to Ed Harris with a Ring t-shirt on and saying, "You call yourself a horror fan, you son of a bitch."
And know that I said that in jest.
No, I'm going to give it a view it. It's not a perfect film by any means, but I feel like I'm nitpicking to harp on what I don't like about it because it does so much that I do like, and I think it's really iconic. Like Patrick said, this is sort of the model of a little urban legend curse movie that I think about, and really the model for a horror movie. Like if I were going to sit down and write a horror movie, it would probably be something really scary happening to somebody, and it would be somebody, maybe a reporter who has to like solve the mystery of why it's happening before they get killed by the spooky thing. I think it's just a very good story. It's surprisingly heartfelt in a moment or two. And Naomi Watts is great. The direction, as Steven described, is great. And it's scary as hell. And even if you've seen it a few times, it's going to jump scare you. You're going to forget about something. That happened to me. So I would give it a view it. I own it, which I do own some bad movies like the Vatican Tapes, but it's one that I'm proud to have in my collection. So Patrick.
Oh, I mean, it's also a view it for sure. I think there are plenty of casual fans who listen to the show, casual horror fans. And also, of course, even the most diehard fan has some blind spots in their viewing history. Obviously, none of us have seen Ringu. I hadn't seen Ringu until today. So, if you haven't seen it before, I think there may be plenty who are listening to the show. Give it a check it out. And as Chris said, I think, and this kind of crystallizes something we've been saying, he was saying it's that like ideal kind of urban legend kind of movie, which you credited to me. I don't even remember saying that tonight, but I think it's almost like the prototype that so many films have been trying to emulate. We talk about like people looking back towards a sort of bygone era of technology or history, social experience. And, I think this is maybe the prototype for like the digital age that everybody is still kind of trying to capture the magic of. But of course, also remember a lot of it is deeply indebted to Ringu. So let's not give The Ring and Gore Verbinski and the gang all the credit. But it's still a banger, still rules. Watch The Ring.
And I hope that someone is listening who hasn't watched The Ring, and then they will.
Yeah.
And I can imagine obviously younger people who weren't maybe of movie viewing age when this was a big deal might have missed it. Or also I can imagine some people who are older and, all the teenagers were screaming about The Ring and they dismissed it as just another 90s, 2000s teen spooky movie,
Like I kind of did. Yeah.
All right. So, stick around and we will spoil everything about The Ring. But first, let me remind you that if you want to keep up with us when we're not putting out new episodes in our little 2-week span between episodes, you can find us online on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at AmonCast, EHMON cast. You can go to our cursed website, everyhorrormovieonnetflix.com, which I will renovate someday. And
some year
you can see a list of some of the episodes that we did years ago, and you can go to our merchandise store and buy a t-shirt with some Every Horror Movie on Netflix art on it. You can also, most importantly is go to your podcast provider of choice, rate us and review us. It helps other people find the show. But secondly, most importantly, you can follow our community on Discord. We have a great little Discord chat going on. The link to that is in the show notes. And we like hearing from our fans about what they thought of the movies and what else they are consuming in the horror space. With that said, we're going to head on down to the spoiler room and tell you what our hero Rachel found on that tape and found out about the tape. We're also going to spoil everything about The Ring in just a few seconds. So go watch the movie if you haven't, or stick around. Welcome back. We're down here in the spoiler well, getting ready to spoil everything about The Ring. So,
We haven't even talked about the well yet.
First, a question. What's the part of the Ring tape that scares you the most?
I don't know why, but for me, the latter just really freaks me out.
The latter I thought was mid, but I respect your opinion.
I don't know. I feel like my real answer is just the cumulative, the whole thing. But I mean, if I have to pick one bit, it's actually the weird bit with the mirrors. I think I'm creeped out by what looks like a portrait, but then it's moving, but then she kind of seems to be acknowledging whoever's filming, and then you see a little bit of Samara, and it's just very off-putting, especially since for the most part the woman in the mirror is just smiling and looking kind of normal.
Yeah, the mirror, she's actually, that's the scariest part for me. The woman brushing her hair in the mirror, and then she looks at you.
Yeah.
All right.
Wait, I got a better answer. Sorry, I need to stop eating.
Yeah, what the hell? Get it together.
I'm so hungry.
Well, it's unusual to see a figure in a mirror from that distance at a camera, but you can't actually see the literal figure. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can only see her face in the mirror. You can't see her from the back, which is, I feel, kind of unusual in a film, a shot that's from that distance.
The scariest thing to me is the looping, high-pitched sound effect that plays throughout the video.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's like meant to be on the soundtrack or if it's like diegetic to the video, but that really gets under my skin, and it plays many times throughout the film.
So this is a big mystery. This is the big mystery. Let me try to just summarize it as succinctly as possible because we don't have all the time in the world here. So the first step of the investigation is our hero, Rachel, Naomi Watts, goes to the cabin where all these kids were staying. In short order, she finds the cursed videotape and watches it, thus marking herself for death in 7 days. She's able to dissect the video using equipment at the newspaper where she works with the help of her ex-boyfriend, and I think he's her colleague at the newspaper, correct? Like he's a photographer who works for the paper?
Yeah.
I think so. Anyway.
Which, and very brief side note, but weird difference between this and Ringu. In Ringu, that character is not like, doesn't have like, he's not an AV nerd. He's a psychic.
Whoa.
Oh, that's so much cooler.
Yeah.
That's so much cooler.
Yeah.
Anyway, so by analyzing the video, she's able to discover that it has something to do with this, woman and her horse farm on this island. We go up to rural Washington. It's an island community, a very small island community. We take
Bodega Bay.
It's basically Bodega Bay, Button Island. We take the ferry to get there. On the ferry, Naomi Watts spooks a horse. There's a ridiculous action sequence. The horse jumps overboard, drowns itself. The horse's owner is a young woman who says, "That's my horse," but then doesn't seem to care that much that the horse just dies a horrible death, which is very unlike any horse owners I've ever known. Everyone I know would have jumped in after their horse. And she's just kind of looking at it. Anyway, but the horse is on the tape. That's why I mentioned that. And the bloody water is on the tape. She takes the ferry to this island and finds out that the woman's dead. There was a epic loss of horse life on the island that shocked the community. The woman's husband is still alive, and she finds out that they had a daughter, but there's really not a lot of documentation of her. She finds out from the community that this couple, the woman and her husband, who's played by Brian Cox in this film.
Drop Succession theme.
Yep. They wanted a daughter. They tried to conceive for quite a long time. They weren't able to do it. And then they left and went abroad and came back with a beautiful baby girl named Samara. The origin of this girl is never explained. And that's kind of interesting to me. I guess we're meant to believe that it's just from some place you don't want to go. A little bit of xenophobia, though. It sort of has hostile vibes to me. Like it's like,
well, no, there's a big reveal that it actually is their biological child. So those words are actually said. Like Naomi Watts is like, Samara actually was their biological child.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, because they make her look like she could be Japanese because she has like the long, like very straight, like black hair that covers her face, or could be Asian, I guess, generally, which is, I mean, a direct visual homage to Ringu. And even the name, I guess, sounds, I mean, certainly not like something that somebody in rural Washington would name their kid. The girl in Ringu is Sadako, but not Samara.
Then why did everybody...
turns out to just be a little white girl who is actually Brian Cox and the woman's actual child.
Oh, she does find the birth certificate.
Yeah.
But I thought... I assumed that was like a fake birth certificate because the neighbors and the community, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of secrets on this community, seem to think that they just like went away and came back with a girl. Okay.
I don't know. It's all like, I will say it's all like unnecessarily sort of like obscure.
Yeah.
And like I could see that, actually I could totally see me being off and maybe the like it being their biological child also being a red herring, but my takeaway was it was their actual like blood child. It all feels very irrelevant to me other than to create like kind of an elaborate reason why it looks exactly like the little Japanese girl from Ringu, but is actually a white girl.
All right. Does Ringu explain like where she comes from or her conception at all, or why she's weird?
She's just a child who has powers, I think, in Ringu. I will say I was kind of tuned out when I watched Ringu because as I started to realize how similar the stories were, until actually this section when they go to like find out the origin of things, I kind of checked out because I was like, I literally just saw this movie.
Okay. Well, then I guess much like Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, there's an implication that there's something about the way they conceived after so much failure that might have opened the door. Maybe she was conceived by a witch or something. Who knows?
Maybe.
Because basically when Samara's born, things start to go wrong. This girl has powers. The fish crop dies up, the horses die, etc. Long story short, these parents are abusive to Samara. They blame her for everything that's going wrong on this island. They keep her locked in a loft over the barn on their property with no freedom. And I don't know if that's before or after they commit her to an institution where she lives out much of her young life. We have videotapes and documents from the institution where she seems to display the ability to project images onto film, which is a phenomenon that has been reported usually by fraudsters in real life, the psychic photography sort of thing. But this is basically where these images on the tape are coming from, we're led to believe. Samara eventually is just so evil that in a pretty upsetting scene, her mother decides to suffocate her and throw her body into a well on the island. And
yes, tries to suffocate her for like literally 2 seconds, and then everyone is stunned that she did not in fact die when she got to the bottom of the well.
She did not die in the bottom of the well. She stayed alive for 7 days, suffering, dying a slow death. And the ceiling, the wooden or stone thing they put over the well to seal it, let her see the little halo ring of light at the top of the well, and that's what the ring is. And that's why that's burned into her brain and burned into this videotape. Years later...
Did you guys notice the couple of like subliminal rings in this? It flashes super briefly at least a couple times.
Yes, but I thought it was just a side effect of LASIK. Anyway, so years later, like they end up building this cabin where these kids hung out on top of the well, which I noticed when they went to the cabin, I was like, that cabin has an odd sort of basement for this sort of cabin. I think we're led to believe that like it was just a normal cabin that had videotapes on it, and then Samara's ghost was able to affect the content of the tape and curse it while it sat in the cabin. Yeah. Maybe. It's kind of ambiguous. Doesn't really matter either. But
Ringu also makes that much more explicit. Like they talk about how she psychically projected onto the tape. And oddly, the American remake is a little more ambiguous about how that happened, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I kind of like it ambiguous. But Naomi Watts, Rachel, and the photographer male lead end up opening the well, Naomi Watts falls in. She finds Samara's skeletal remains, and they're able to put her to rest. And they're like, this is so sad what happened to this girl. And it is sad. She goes home. She's like, all right, I think the curse has been lifted from me and from the boy and from the other boy. And she's talking to her son, who has been in psychic dialogue with Samara for days now after having watched the tape. And the boy, in a little creepy kid moment, which chilled my blood, gave me the goosebumps, is like, wait, you set her spirit free? Why would you do that? She's evil.
You're not supposed to help her, right? Is what he says.
Right. Which is kind of funny because we spent all this time building sympathy for Samara. And she's like, we don't have to worry about him and her anymore, sweetie. We set her free. And he's like, she should stay in the fucking well. So
I didn't need any of this shit. I didn't need this last 15 to 20 minutes at all.
Oh, that's interesting. I was actually just about to say, this is the kind of like false ending that I do like, because, you know, I bitch on at least every 3 episodes about the Freddy Krueger Nightmare on Elm Street #1 ending, where it's like, oh, we gotcha. But this actually is like, it's normally you would almost like cut, like you'd end on the kid being like, you set her free, and then it's like sequel setup. But no, it's kind of escalating into final action, which mostly kind of rules, actually. I mean, you get, of course, the fucking iconic scene of her crawling out of the TV after this.
It could be the effect of having seen this already, where I was like, wait a second. This movie, I wasn't looking at the runtime, and I'm like, this should be over by now. And I'm over it. Like, I feel satisfied. But I haven't seen the most iconic shot of the whole movie yet.
Yeah.
Did I miss it? I felt like I was going insane. And I do like the fake out. Like, the scene with the boy is great. But there are so many things in this movie that, even though, like, it looks great, there's a lot of, like, kind of tedium to it. And that sort of comes with the sort of procedural kind of story that this is, right? But I could handle most of it. When I got to that point, I was like, I like that you went there, movie, but I don't need the final confrontation. And I definitely don't need the sequel setup at the very end, which is what that all leads to. What?
I don't think it's a sequel setup.
Well, they made a sequel with the same cast.
Yeah.
To me, that's just, I don't know. That's like the most satisfying way this could have ended. You can't like vanquish Samara. And I guess I could have been okay with just it ending with like her, you know, helping Samara find peace and Samara moves on. But I love the ending. It's just this, it's sick. It fits with the somewhat selfish asshole type of character that we've learned Naomi Watts is, and also invites the question, what the hell else would you do? You know? I
mean, I guess I kind of like that, but it's just sort of like at this point, the movie's almost 2 hours, and it felt like, I don't know, it felt a little unearned to me. I'm curious, how does Ringu end?
Same shit, except actually worse. So we haven't explained this yet, but I mean, so I'll kind of finish Chris's summary. Samara comes out of the TV. We learn that Samara is still alive or undead, I guess, and well, by the fact that she comes after Naomi Watts' boyfriend and kills him, inviting Naomi Watts' question, why the hell didn't she come after me? He was a day ahead of me or behind me. Like, Naomi Watts should have already died at this point, basically. And she realizes that the reason Samara let her go is because Naomi Watts actually made a copy of the Ring tape, which is good for Samara because it continues to like kind of perpetuate her existence. And there's more avenues for her to infect people.
Well, Samara's an artist. That's the main thing. Samara's an artist, and she wants to be heard. She wants her voice to be taken seriously. She wants to speak about all these things that happened to her, and that's foreshadowed early on because the little boy has been drawing all these fucked up drawings of his dead cousin, and the teacher's like, what's going on with this? And Naomi Watts is like, this is how kids express themselves, by drawing fucked up images. And so Samara wants to basically just like communicate. She wants the mic, and by giving her an outlet, that's how Naomi Watts figures that she was spared.
Yeah, so she like has her son, who has seen the tape, make a copy of the tape with her, like basically guiding him to do it so that he is also spared. And, you know, the movie ends, the Ring, the American version ends with him asking what happens to the people who watch it. And it's almost like Naomi Watts may as well like look at the camera and kind of like smirk, and then it cuts to static, implying that like
we are the people who watch it.
Yeah, which is fine. And Ringu actually ends. It's more fucked up. They do the same shit. They make the tape, but then she's driving and she like calls her dad. She's like going to give the tape to her dad.
Whoa. Okay, I like that.
Damn. I guess if he doesn't have much time left, anyway.
Yeah.
Is he established as like an older guy or a sick guy or a guy who's like, oh, you know, I'm just surviving, I'm not living, that kind of guy?
I want to say he's not, but again, I was like super half watching Ringu because I was like, I just saw this movie.
There's a deleted scene again because they established the video store that shows that she takes it and drops it off at a video store.
Oh,
Are you kidding me?
No,
I don't hate that, but I like the ending that they went with better for sure.
Me too.
Well, that ending would
stuff was bad.
That ending would tie in with my theory that this is like partially about like censorship and like how we kind of build up these myths around horror movies or something. But so I would hate it if it ended that way. I would hate it.
It's about something. I couldn't really put my finger on it, but that's definitely a theme, right? Like you see all this stuff about people watching TV and screen time, and I don't know how it's articulated, but the message I received was like that the movie has something to say about like what are the ramifications of all the TV you're putting into your brain, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean the girls discuss that in the very first scene. I think it's a movie that really wants to think it's saying something about that, but kind of makes like vague gestures in that direction as opposed to like actually having something to say.
It doesn't commit to a statement. Definitely. Yeah. I'd be curious to see if I'm sure there's a billion think pieces about this online saying it's about any number of things, but it definitely seems to be leaning in that direction.
Well, all right, you guys are going to think I'm fucking with you, but I found a comment on Reddit from Gore Verbinski doing an AMA on Reddit. And one of the themes in this movie, you know what it is?
Capitalism?
No.
I'm just trolling. What?
9/11.
What? Fuck me. How is this about 9/11?
It came out in 2002.
Fresh wound.
Yeah, he said that someone asked him, what do you believe is the key to making a story that is truly frightening for the viewer? And he says, well, I think it's really, now it's like, I think this might have been like speech to text. It's not completely, it's a little hard to read, but I think what he's saying is, I think it's really important when the curtain closes, you've tapped into some contemporary fear. I think if we can tap into some sort of contemporary issue, the film tends to linger or stay with you. With a film like The Ring, the film came out after 9/11 and was very much about the sort of transferable nature of hatred. And in order to save yourself, you're making a copy of this videotape and making sure somebody else watches it. And it's a real palpable sense of what did I do to deserve this? Why me? And that sort of horror of terrorism doesn't really go after the culprit. It goes after it's seemingly random in its approach. So... I guess he's talking about, you know, the abuse that Samara endures and how somebody has to pay for it, and who pays for it isn't really the mother, isn't really the father. It's just whoever. Somebody's got to pay for it. She's a terrorist. We must stop these terrorist killers.
I mean, it was...
Now watch this VHS tape.
It was filmed in 2001. And I don't believe it was all filmed after September 11th, let alone written before September 11th.
Well, then this man's full of shit.
I believe that... I could see him saying that in the context of that's why it connected with people so well. But as far as that being intention behind the film, I think that's bullshit.
That's what I'm hearing, too. It sounded like it was phrased as like why people... why it resonates so strongly, not what he was trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Chris Cooper played a murderer in 2 scenes meant to bookend the film, but was ultimately cut. That's
a murderer?
Fun fact.
How would a murderer fit into this movie?
Don't know, man.
Put Chris Cooper in anything. Why would you? Why would you take him out of something? That's crazy.
Put Chris Cooper in everything.
Yeah.
Well, I really want to see The Ring too. I never have, and you know.
I believe it's rocking a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, is it? Is it really? That's sad. So it's just
it is hard for me. It is hard for me to imagine where you go with this.
Here's what's crazy, though. I forgot there was a Ring 2, which is insane, because, like, the Ring is so big, I feel like I would have seen the Ring 2. Oh, I'm sorry, it has a 20%, but let me make sure I'm correct about this. So, Naomi Watts and David Dorfman reprised their roles. It looks like it was...
Samara.
It looks like it was directed by the creator of the original Ring.
Director of the original, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he said if you're gonna make fucking... Hold on.
Well, the original is also based on a novel, which now I'm curious to read the novel as well. I feel deeply invested in this property.
He said if you're gonna fucking make $250 million off of my movie, you're gonna let me make the next one and give me that Hollywood money to do it.
Apparently, hey, Chris, guess who's in Rings, the 2017? I guess this is still, it's still a sequel. It's the third installment in the Ring series, but guess who's in it?
If it's about rings, it's gotta be about LeBron. It's gotta have LeBron in it.
What?
No, Johnny Galecki.
Whoa! Why did you just address that to Chris?
Wow. Yeah,
Suicide Kings.
Steven likes him more than me. But
I like him even more.
Oh.
Dude, I want a whole ass Suicide Kings Ring sequel where it's all the
Suicide Rings.
Back. Suicide Rings. I gotta call a producer. This is gonna be fire.
Wow. Okay, we might have to just end the podcast after this. I don't think it gets any deeper or more up our own asses than Suicide Rings.
Suicide Rings.
Fans, if you're into graphic design, graphic art, please make that poster for us and drop it on the Discord.
I think the podcast has to end, if only so that we can devote our time, life, and energy into recruiting the entire cast of Suicide Kings to be in our movie Suicide Rings, written and directed by us.
Let's be real. It's hard enough to recruit each other to record this podcast. I don't think that's going to turn out well.
I mean, listen, I'm pretty sure Henry Thomas is less busy than us, so we can do this.
We're going to go to More Say Nightmares and pitch this to him, and he's going to help.
Yes.
He's going to say, all right, you know who's a big fan of The Ring and of Suicide Kings? Mike Flanagan. We're going to get him on the phone.
Dude, I would pay, how much do you think it costs to get, your minute or two with Henry Thomas? I would pay $80 for you and me, and another $40 if Steven wants to come along for this too, for you to go up to him and pitch Suicide Rings to him while I film, just to have the memory.
It could happen. We'll see how many Labats I have.
Just for him to go, okay, and wait for his assistant to shuffle us away.
He has to have seen The Ring. You think Henry Thomas has seen The Ring?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, of course.
All right, so, okay, if you've seen The Ring and he says no, then that's the end of the bit.
Ask him if he's seen Suicide Kings. That's the better question.
True. All right, well, what the hell are we watching next week?
Who's choosing next week?
Chris is
choosing. Look at that. It's my turn to choose. Okay. Well, we're actually going to go back to our roots. We are going to go back to our roots.
What does that even mean at this point?
You guys might not even know. You guys might not even know this, but there is a movie title I saw on Netflix. There were two, but one of these.
I'm scared. This preamble is scaring me.
There were two movies that I saw on Netflix that gave me the idea to do this podcast.
Zombies?
Oh.
And one of them turned out not to be classified under horror, so we've never done it to this point. But I just checked the horror movie registry, and it's on there now. So they changed the genre. They added a genre. And so this is literally a movie I've been wanting to watch and review and discuss since before we started this show. It's Circle.
Circle. Not The Circle.
No, just Circle.
Okay.
It's about a group of strangers seized and awaiting execution on a circle. They're all standing on circles. They're standing in a circle, and each of them is on their own circle. And they have to face the impossible task of choosing the one person among them worthy of being spared.
No.
Oh, wow.
Okay. What about this made you want to watch, review, and discuss every horror movie on Netflix with your friends
because
on a podcast?
it was just like a vaguely interesting concept. Just a low budget, weird horror movie. I'm like, what? Who would watch this movie? What is this movie?
Oh my god, I'm looking at the cast on IMDb, and we have characters named Wife, the Lesbian, the College Guy, Pretty Girl, the Cancer Survivor, and the Asian Kid. So,
oh my god,
this is going to be interesting.
Love it. Yeah, I said I need a reason to watch movies like Circle and all these other little weird movies that are on there.
That actually sounds not dissimilar from the labels that we give people on this podcast when we don't remember their character name.
Yes.
Well, we usually just call him by the actor's name. Well, I guess if we know the actor, often we do.
Yeah, when we don't know the actor's name, we're just like, so the college kid.
Well, it'll be easy to discuss this one.
Yeah. So the wife and the college kid.
Oh,
wow. Right. How interesting. What a great premise for the next episode, Chris.
It's like we're coming full circle.
Oh, wow.
All right. Well, that'll be in 2 weeks. We'll be discussing Circle. Until then, like I said, find us on social media at AmonCast and join the conversation in our Discord. The link, again, is in the show notes. Until then, for every horror movie on Netflix, I'm Chris.
I'm Patrick.
I'm Steven.
See you next time.